My name is Phil Vu, and I'll be your trainer for today. Today's session really is an overview of PolicyMap. The goal of the tool is to basically get our users comfortable with understanding the data that's in PolicyMap and then being able to make a map and export that map. It sounds really simple, but there are a lot of really neat things along the way that we're going to cover in the end. A little bit about who we are. PolicyMap is a part of a larger nonprofit in the greater Philadelphia area. We are what is called a community development financial institution, or a CDFI, it's sometimes it's called. And all that means is that we are a community bank with a very specific mission, and that mission is to help revitalize low and moderate income communities through very unique programs, things like affordable housing, public housing, charter schools, grocery stores, and even health centers. And we've always used data, but in a spatial way, to look at the neighborhoods that we want to invest in and see the impact of those investments on a map. We've always used data, but we felt that visualizing that data is probably the best way to use it. And that's really what the genesis of PolicyMap. We wanted to build a tool that gave users the same abilities to interact with data in a spatial way, but without having to have all of the institutional knowledge of how to make data and put data onto a map. So coming to a policy map type tool, you are probably looking for data in the first part of it, and then how to use that data in the map is the second part. And so with that, I always take our users to this page here. I will send this link along or it'll be available at the end of the session. But this page is a great place to start if you are a little bit familiar with PolicyMap or not familiar at all. What this does here is summarize the different categories of data you're going to see when we go into the tool itself. And so the way it works is the table of contents on the right-hand side mimics those categories we're going to look at. And so let's say we want to go to economy. It'll tell you that within economy, you can find jobs data at the local level, at the county metro level. There's small business information, there's unemployment information, workforce characteristics, and so forth. And so what it's trying to do in this page is give you a very broad summary of what data is available within that category. Because when you actually go into the category itself, in the case of workforce characteristics, you'll find the number of people, the percentage of people, the workforce by age, race, ethnicity, education, and so forth. So it's there's more details within that subcategory you're going to find as well. The other part that's helpful to this page is going to tell you what years are available for the data that you're looking at. So again, if we look at workforce characteristics, it's available from 2002 all the way into 2015. A couple of things about the data in PolicyMap. Our baseline is 2000, so we do not go past 2000 data-wise. And then for the most current data sets, it really depends on the source of the data. Most federal agencies are about 1 to 2 years behind, and just it takes that long for those agencies to process and collect really the data to put out. So in the case of BLS for unemployment, we actually have 2018 numbers as well, including as well as to 2017. The other helpful part of this page is going to tell you what data is available at a geography. So most of the data in PolicyMap is what we call aggregate data, meaning that it's just summarized to various geographies. And this table here is going to tell you from left to right, which is the largest to smallest, the various geographies that this particular data set is available at. So in the case of jobs at the local level, it's available down to the smallest level we use in PolicyMap, which is the block group. We'll talk about that when we get into the tool a little bit, but then it's telling you here that you can see larger geographies as you either zoom out or aggregate out. So tracts, counties, cities, zip codes, and so forth. There's links to the source. I'll show you how to get to the source a little bit differently as well, but this is a really great place to start because as I scroll through here, you'll see there is a lot of data, everything from flood zones to air quality to farmers markets to brownfields and so forth. And so what it's trying to do here is just give you a broader summary of the category without having to get too far into a data set. All right, again, I'll send that link along or it'll be posted at the end of the session. Within the tool itself, there are a variety of different ways to interact with all that data we just kind of summarized a bit from the last page. The maps page, which is where we're going to spend most of our time today, is the ability to visualize that data. Again, the goal of PolicyMap. There are a lot of really unique things you can do with it. Before we get too far into the maps page, There are other ways to interact with data within PolicyMap, and they're available within these tabs in the very top. So I'll give us a really broad overview of these other features. We do offer additional trainings to cover the other sections, as well as really informative tutorials that walk through these other sections. But let me give you a broader summary of them. The tables page is the ability to compare data across multiple geographies. That's kind of the basics of what it is, meaning that if you have 5 counties or 6 zip codes and you want to see what those places look like against each other, then you would use the location bar in the very top, add your location. It'll add it to the bar chart below, and then you get to choose the data you want to compare against. So this allows you to compare income across cities, education across zip codes, or health indicators across smaller geographies like tracts and block groups. The reports feature is probably a much more traditional way to look at data. This is saying that I have one location and I need as much information as possible for that one location. Reports are pre-built, meaning that you do not have the ability to customize them, but what we try our best to do is group together very similar data sets to be built around a report. So a community profile in this example is really just a demographic report. It'll have population, race, and income, but then it'll also have information about the communities, things like housing information, vacancies, home ownerships, crime, and even jobs information. There's a really unique health report, there's a housing report, and so forth. The 3-layer maps, as the name implies, is the ability to overlay 3 layers of data. So it works similar to the maps page, where the goal is to visualize data, but it's a little bit different because what you're doing here is saying, I need to find places that would meet the intersection of 3 different layers that I'm working in. So coming to a tool like 3-layer maps is a great site selection type tool because you're gonna use a spatial layer to understand places and find out where those places would intersect with each other. And then finally, the data loader is the ability for you to upload a spreadsheet of addresses. And then from there, our system will geocode the addresses or plot them on a map. And then once they're in PolicyMap, you can use them alongside all the other features that we just talked about within the tool. All right, so those are a very broad summary of the main tools itself on PolicyMap. Again, we have tutorials that will walk you through all the different features under support, also be posted at the end of the session as well. But the maps page are pretty simple. They are fully interactive, meaning you can click and drag the map around. You can zoom in and out using the zoom bar on the right. You can scroll in and out with the scroll wheel on your mouse. So again, pretty basic stuff when it comes to online mapping navigation. The location bar on the maps page work like a Google Maps. You can type in an address. It will zoom to the address, it'll drop a little pin, and then from there you can still pan to a different part of the neighborhood, zoom in to get closer, or zoom out to get a broader picture of that address in that area. The location bar also works as a search bar for places. So you might not always have an address. Maybe you have a zip code or a city or a county. With that, you can just type in your geography. And again, instead of dropping a pin, it'll actually draw the boundary for that geography and then show you the area that it's in. So this is our zip code boundary that I have on top of the map at the same time. One of the more unique features of the Maps tool without any data loaded is that you can click onto the map at any time. And what this will do is it'll draw the smallest geography that's in our universe and then show you the various geographies that that point actually sits in. And so this is a really neat window into the different aggregations that we use in PolicyMap, but also of the building blocks that the census uses when it comes to summarizing data to larger geographies. So a really quick summary so you understand the boundaries a little bit, but the very smallest geography we use in PolicyMap is what is called a block group. And so the census that we do every 10 years, and now with the American Community Survey every year for some people, The census does not publish data at the individual level. They group people together into these geographies. And the smallest geography we use from the census is what is called a block group. So a block group contains about 400 to 1,500 people. And then from there, it's kind of the building blocks and its density of population. So in this case, you see this block group is fairly small for its size. But if I were to go to maybe along the river here, you'll see now that this block group in Camden is much larger because, again, it's less dense in population. So from there, these geographies somewhat aggregate up. So a grouping of block groups form a census tract. A grouping of tracts forms other geographies like a ZICTA or counties or county subdivisions. And then, of course, counties and cities will generate or form metros, and we have states and the nation. So these are sometimes what we call a predefined geography, meaning that they are in our universe, and also geographies that data is generally aggregated to. It also means that we give users the ability to search for these geographies either with the open text window of the location bar or using the drop-down menu to search for these other predefined geographies. So things like tracts and block groups, more complex geographies like congressional districts, school districts, state legislative boundaries. So to use some of these, you just choose the state that you're going to be in. And in the case of state legislative districts, the upper is the Senate and the lower is the House or Assembly. And then with this, it'll zoom to the area. It would actually draw the boundary for the area that you're working in. All right, so the location bar on the very top, its goal is to navigate the map to the place that you're going to work in. You can also overlay those boundaries using the map boundaries button on the very bottom here. This allows you to use all those predefined geographies that we just talked about a little bit, but also the boundaries that you probably are searching for when it comes to using the tool. So that way you can overlay congressional districts, you can combine multiple boundaries and see what, let's say, tracts look like a congressional boundary. As with all data that's visualized, always be careful how much you put on, because as you can see, it can get a little cluttered and a little messy. And then also by default, our system will display two default boundaries, which is road and land use. And again, you can remove that to have a much more clean map, as you can see, to start with. Okay, so once you have your map situated to a given area, the next step really is the ability to start adding data onto the map. And that data is available from these categories in the very top. The first category, though, is the My Data tab. These are any data sets that either you have saved into your favorites, you have uploaded using one of the uploader tools in PolicyMap, the data loader, or we have uploaded it for you, or even in some really unique cases, users that have created a data set and put it into your account to interact with. So My Data is basically anything that is really situated or related to your account. So the categories are really simple. We will go through a few of these just to summarize, but before we get too far into them, there is a distinction of the type of data you can use within PolicyMaps, and there's two very unique data types. And they're all broken up by columns in every category that you see here. So columns 1 and 2 are what we call a data layer. And layer data is just that. It's layer that's aggregated or data aggregated to a geography. So it displays these very colorful maps. There is no address level data associated to a data layer. So it is all aggregate data. Again, that is columns 1 and 2. And sometimes, as you can see here, it cascades the menu over to the next column. Column 3, though, is points and data points. So data points themselves is really just address level data sets. This is icons that would represent the address itself. As you can see on the left here, there are two legends. There's a legend for points and a legend for layers, and we'll talk about both of those. But you can also see that you can overlay points and layers at the same time. And that's the really big distinction. Again, data layers, columns 1 and 2, data points is column 3. So data-wise in PolicyMap, what we tried our best to do is put data in a category that hopefully makes sense where it belongs. Under demographics, these are probably most commonly familiar indicators related to demographics, things like total population, population density, racial characteristics, ethnicity, age groups. Then we get into some really unique demographic variables that the census started producing. So things like a fantastic veterans data, language spoken at home, foreign born, and so forth. Still within demographics, you'll have information on households, the type of households, the head of households. There's type of families themselves. There's election data. This is at the county level. So it is not at the precinct level, but you do have some good information down to the county level for elections. Under income and spending, it will start with some very basic variables related to income, so things like per capita and family. Household income is the most commonly used income measurement, and so because of that, the census does break out to things like head of households, tenure, the very specific income brackets that households would fall in. So this will give you the number or the percentage of households that make either less or within the ranges shown. There's household income by age groups. There's poverty data by people and families. There's a really fantastic data from the IRS. So this is the taxes that we do every year. These are 1040 tax forms. This is at the individual level, so it's not the corporate or business level. But with this, you do have a wealth of information. The smallest geography that the IRS produces this at is the zip code level. And so with that, you can see things like total income, unemployment compensations, various deduction programs, credits like ETIC and AMT, and also other programs and taxes like healthcare payment and taxes due. Still within income and spending is the spending side. So these are affordability calculations for people and households. Cost burden is a really fantastic data set that talks about the number of people or the percentage of households that spend 30 to 50% of their income on various costs. A really good measurement for foreclosure studies. Other variables are more related to federal programs. So if you do work in federal programs, you're familiar with AMI or the Area Median Income. And so we do have those numbers from HUD themselves. And then we create current year estimates for the low mod calculations against AMI. We jump to quality of life. You'll find a bit of a hodgepodge category of data, but this will give you things like crime data from the FBI crime report, broadband internet, which is a really cool data set as well, how people get to work, heating types we've talked about, and then we get into some really unique study data that's available within the tool that we coincide with other federal programs. So if you've heard of the USDA Food Access Study, we also created a very similar study, but instead of just measuring access to a grocery store, we actually measured access to a grocery store that has fresh foods. Definitely a different concept, but the end result is the same. Still within quality of life, you'll find point data sets, things like grocery retail locations. These are actually the grocery stores that were used in our study for food access. There's SNAP locations, there brownfield and Superfund sites, libraries, and other nonprofits and such. There's unemployment information that we talked about from BLS, and then of course the workforce characteristics for jobs. So these are the characteristics of the workforce living in a given area or working in a given area, and it is broken out by the demographics of that workforce. So income, educational attainment, age, sex, race, and so forth. And then lastly, just to kind of summarize a handful of other categories that we have here, under federal guidelines, these are all the various federal programs that we participate in as a CDFI nonprofit, but these are other programs that the federal agencies have asked us to put into the PolicyMap platform for their applicants to use because it's just an easier way for them to pull data and visualize data for applicants. So New Markets is a really unique program. There are some new ones that started out this year, including the Opportunity Zones, but more traditional programs like CDBG, block grants, RECAP, Qualified Census Tracts, and then other banking programs like CRA and USDA or hub zones. All right, so it's a lot of data, as you can see. And again, the data summary page that we talked about in the very beginning is a good place to start, giving you a broad idea of what's available within a category. We do encourage data exploration within a category. Sometimes it's fun to get lost in a category of data because there's just so much to play with. But if you ever do get lost or you can't find the data you are hoping to look for, you can also use this other search bar next to the location bar. And this is a data search, basically. This allows you to use keywords. And with the set of keywords, it'll find the data that matches that set of keywords that's in the PolicyMap tool. So this is all the different variables related to poverty. And from there, once you select it, it'll load the data just like you were finding the map itself. So hopefully that will give you another way to get to the data that you're looking for and working with. So let me add a really simple data set for data layers, and we'll start talking about what you can do with data when it comes. Again, if you are interested in any other categories of data, that first page that we're going to send to you that we talked about is a good place to start giving you a broad summary. But I'm going to put household income on here, and we can talk about what it looks like when you have a data layer in the map. So when you first add a data layer, you'll see the very simple sentence in the very top. This is a summary or a quick sentence of what we is displayed on the map itself. So this is telling you this is the median household income of a given area. I mentioned that the American Community Survey is actually a 5-year rolling estimate. And so because of that, we show the years as 2012 to 2016, encompassing the 5 years. If you are ever not familiar with the data or you want to learn more about any data layers you add on the map, click onto the title itself. It'll drop down a longer description, and then that will give you more information about this particular data set, and sometimes maybe a bit of methodology for the data or just a better description for some of the variables that are here. So in the case of median household income, it talks about what makes up a household, but it also talks about the different values and ranges that were created within PolicyMap. If you want to go down a much further rabbit hole of data, you can click onto the See Data Directory link here, or the source link at the legend at any time. And this will take you to another page that is a great place that we'll send to you. And this is our data library page. So this page here will list every data provider that we use in PolicyMap, giving us the ability to be as transparent as possible for any data that we use in PolicyMap, but also give our users much more detail and sometimes some complexity about the methodology that we use to create some of these layers on the map itself. So in this case, this is talking about the census as well as the ACS. This talks about the variables and the geographies we use. Many times, for almost every variable or source that we have, we'll always have a direct link to the source. So that way, if you wanted to download the data and recreate these layers yourself, you're able to do this with these links. But if we get into the description for the census, and here we talk about the files that were actually used to create these layers, the geographies that were used, custom geographies or new geographies like ZICTAs and such. The legend itself is going to give you the tools to be able to read the map that's being shown with the layers that are available. There are probably two really important fields to look at when you first pull up a data layer. And the first is the shaded by. And so the shaded by is actually telling you the geography that's being shown in the map. In this case, it's saying census tracts. And now the year behind the census tract isn't the year that the data was available. It's actually the year that the boundary, the tracts themselves were created. So again, we go back to the biennial census. Every 10 years with the census also updates the boundaries because population shift. Tracts get larger and smaller or split because the population moves to other places, allowing the census to redraw block groups and tracts and such to accommodate that shift in population change. With the American Community Survey being published every year, that update is actually now happening more annually. And so hopefully by the end of this year, you might see Census Tract 2017 versus 2010, some more updated boundaries available from the census. The actual year itself is still, of the data, is still 2016 from the ACS. So if you read the map today or right now with this data here, you'll see that anything in the dark purple is a census tract that has a median household income of 78,000 or more. I know it's really small to read, but and then anything in the lighter color are tracts that have 35,000 or less. You can click onto the map also at any time, and it will draw that smallest geography that we have in PolicyMap that you're viewing at, but also show you the various geographies that it aggregates up to. So in this example here, this particular tract has a median household income of 177,000. It sits within a ZICTA of 191,000. The county is 81,000. The metro is 63,000, and so forth as you go higher and higher. And we go across the street a little bit into Philadelphia County, the number drops off dramatically. So in this case, this particular tract has a median income of 30,000 versus the 177,000 on the other side. So the legend initially gives you all the tools to read the map, but it also will give you the ability to customize the map and the data a little bit. So you can do things like changing the year that's available here. So you can go back in time and see what income was in 2000. You'll see that the title changes to now, instead of estimated household income, to the actual uh, income of a household in 2000. The ranges changes from 78,000 in the dark purple to 57,000 in the dark purple as well. And if you click onto the map, you'll see the values for the year that you've added onto the map. The variable is unique in PolicyMap because it allows you to change how the data itself is displayed. And so the variable for income, the default variable is dollar amounts because you want to see income as dollars. But if I select here, you'll see that now we have options to see percent change variables across the various years that are available for this income data set. So we can see a 5-year change from the 5 years of American Community Survey, or a 16-year change from the 2000 baseline for PolicyMap to the most recent ACS. Selecting percent change calculations, you'll see the title changes as well. So now it's going to say a percent change in income between 2011 2016. The ranges changes from dollar amounts to percentages. And in this example, then anything in a dark purple is still a census tract that has an increase of 18.95% or more, whereas the dark orange is a decrease of 8.32% or less. So again, clicking onto the tracks, it's now telling me that this particular tract almost had a decrease of 13% in income in the 5 years, whereas the tract across the county line had an increase of 34% on that area. So the variable is very unique within PolicyMap. It is also dynamic based on the data and the source. So some data sets have maybe a handful of variables, whereas some data sets will have 5, 10 variables to choose from. And it really depends on the complexity of the data that you're going to work with. And then finally, the really unique way to customize the data is the ranges itself. The default ranges that you see here are quintiles, and it's basically the system takes the total number of geographies, which in this example is census tracts, and evenly divides those tracts in buckets of fifths, without looking at the values of the tracts themselves. And that's really how the ranges are created here. So as you can see, quintiles are good enough to give you a representation of what variances occur within an area. But a lot of times coming to a tool like PolicyMap and using the data like the census and such, you are looking for very specific ranges, or you need data to be shown at very unique ranges. And so we wanted to give users the ability to control that. And that's simply by clicking onto the range button, and this will release the fields themselves, allowing you to go in here and manually enter the values. So maybe we want to find places that have extremely low income. So I'll bring it down to 15,000, but I'll bring this up a little higher to maybe 50,000, and then this one really high to like 75, and then we'll go and cap out some really high income households. And so with a few edits, we're able to quickly identify places that have extremely high income, maybe incomes outside of the range that we want to work in because they might not need the same services as the other income ranges that we need to focus on. So these dark purples are places that have incomes above 125,000. And then on the other side of that spectrum now are places that have income below 15,000. Some of these are really college students or just low income areas. So the ability to edit range allows you to fully customize the layer of data that's here, having it show exactly the places that meet that criteria that you're trying to work in. You can also control how many ranges are being shown. So that way, if you wanted to show a handful of ranges, you can tweak the map to just show 3. You can also change the color. If you don't like our beautiful purples that we have on here, we do have a handful of other palettes to choose from. And that is a data layer. So the one thing that I always want to reiterate when it comes to using data layers within PolicyMap is to make sure you look at the legend and take a moment to make sure that it's customized the way you want this layer to be shown. The year is shown, the variable is shown, the geography you want it to aggregate to, and even the ranges that are being shown in the map. We wanted to give users the ability to really control what's being shown, and the legend is that tool to give you that control. Okay, so that is a data layer and some of the really unique things you can do with the data layer. Let me add a point data set onto the map, and then from there we can talk about how to export maps and do any other customs to the map itself. So let me add a really simple point data set, just like we looked at income as a very basic one to look at. Public schools is another very easy data set to appear. So again, point data sets have a legend just like a data layer. And just like a data layer, if you wanted to learn more about the source or where this point data sets comes from, click onto the source link within the legend. This will take you to that data library page that I initially talked about. And then from here, this will give you as much information as possible about, in this case, who we pulled public schools data from, which is the National Center for Educational Statistics. And then you can also click onto the link here to download the raw file itself if you need to. And then in here, we talk about, in the case of public schools, the different programs that we actually merge data-wise into the public school data that we have on PolicyMap. So point data sets are probably the easiest data sets to explain, mainly because they're just really simple data sets. They are icons that represents an address, and each address you can click onto to learn more about that particular location. So this is Harrington Avery School. It's the regular school, it's a primary school. It covers K through 8th grade. It has a total number of almost 600 students, has a 24-to-1 student teacher ratio. It's lots of free and reduced, almost the entire student body. L is eligible for free and reduced. This is the breakdown of each class, the demographics of the student. It is predominantly Black, and then what those numbers look like in percentages. So each school has a wealth of data to interact with and just learn about. But what we wanted to do was turn some of this data into filters or the ability to show just the points that you want to show on the map. Because when you add a point data set, you're displaying 100% of the points on the map at the extent that you're looking at. And so the filters allows you to basically whittle down or bring down the number of points based on just very specific ranges or categories that you want to show. The filters are available in the legend as well. And in the case of public schools, you can filter by things like the type of schools, the status, the levels that it covers, the individual grades. If we keep going through, is it a magnet school? Is it a charter school? And we get to the demographics of the schools themselves. So there's a lot of really specific and unique ways to filter points. But let's do a very simple one. Let's say we just want to show middle schools in the map. So with a very quick edit, now only middle schools are being displayed on the map at once. The neat thing with filters is that you can combine multiple filters on the map. So let's say we want to show middle schools and high schools. And so now both type of schools covering basically 7th through 12th are available on the map at the same time. The other really unique feature of filters is that you can cross-tab or use different filters at the same time. So now I can say, of the middle schools and high schools in the map that are being shown, show me places that have fewer than 250 students in the schools themselves. So now only middle schools and high schools with 250 students or fewer are now shown on the map. And that's really the neat function of the filters for points, is that it allows you to, again, to control what exactly is being shown on the map without having to show everything at once. And then finally, you can take one filter and color code it based on the values within that points. So this brings all of my schools back. There's no more filters between middle, high school, and total number of students. This is going to show me all the schools, but now color code the schools based on student teacher ratio. So anything in the blue has an 18 or more student teacher ratio, and anything in the orange has a 13 or less student teacher ratio value. And then finally, of course, you can take points and layers, as we talked about initially, and put them on the map at the same time, giving you a chance to make these really cool maps. Sometimes you can see some unique correlations with some of these variables. As you can see, Camden has majority of the schools have less than 13, but then they're in areas of low income. All right, so that's kind of the basics of PolicyMap and the different data sets and layers in the map itself. Before we get too far into the tool, let me just talk about a little bit of the different data sets and how you can put them on the map. And then from there, I'll show you how to export maps, and we should have plenty of time for that. So as I went through the description in the very beginning that talked about these other features up here, the one thing we talked about is 3-layer maps, because the way maps works by itself is that you can only look at one layer of map at a time, meaning that if you wanted to go from income to, let's say, education enrollment for public schools, it flips the map over to just public schools. You cannot display multiple layers on the maps page. It'll always flip to the next maps. And that's really where 3-layer maps comes into play. That's the tool that you're going to use to overlay income with percentage of people in public schools and so forth, or any of the other layer data on the map. But point data sets, you can overlay as many as you want. So let's say we want to find out how many of our public schools are next to a hospital. And so now we have a map that shows public schools next to hospitals, and with point data sets, you can have as many of these as you want on the map. So that way we can say maybe grocery stores as well, and it'll get more and more busy. So point data sets, you can have as many points on the map as you want. Just always be careful, because as you can see, it gets a little cluttered. So just always be conscious about how much data is being shown in the map. So that's the two distinction of data types. Data layers, you're looking at one layer at a time on the map, or you're going to use the 3-layer maps to show multiple layers, whereas data points, you can display multiple point data sets in the map, including data sets that you've uploaded using the data loader alongside other point data sets. All right, and then finally, now that you've built this map and you have this really unique look and color and customization, you want to do something else with this map besides just leaving it within PolicyMap. So there's a couple of really unique ways you can share a map that you create in PolicyMap, and they're all available within these icons in the top right. The one icon I always tell users to focus on is the save icon. This allows you to save this particular map that you created into your account. And then from here, you are basically taking a snapshot of this map, and you can come back to this map at any time. So a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, you can pull up this map. It'll have updated data, but everything you did to the data itself, the ranges, the customization, the filters, the zoom and everything will be always saved for that instance. Within Save, you can also create a project, and a project basically allows you to save all the different features within PolicyMap, maps, tables, reports, uploaded data sets into one project, allowing you to show all the different ways that you've added data to a project. But if you wanted to take this map offline and email it to another user, print it out, and put it into a Word document or PowerPoint, you're going to use the print function to do just that. So when you select print, it'll open up a very simple dialog box. This window here allows you to pan still within the box, allowing you to center the map to the area that you're in. You can use the zoom bar to zoom in and out still to really get it exactly. On the left-hand side of the dialog box are customization options for this, allowing you to do things like increase the font size in case you needed a larger view, change the orientation of the printout. So Philadelphia is primarily a vertical area, so we can change this to portrait, and you can see the difference of what it covers in that process. The format is really how you want to use this printout when you have it exported. The PNG is a really great option to print something out and put it into an insert or email it to another user, whereas the PNG will do those things as well, but it is more of a dynamic picture file. So think of it as the ability for you to crop and paste things or make it things larger and smaller and even colorize them in a graphic tool. The title is editable as well, so you can add additional text in here. So if you are working in a given project or area, you can add that information on top. You can also remove all this information if you wanted to and have just a clean map without nothing to display or worry about. The more option, it gives you even more ways to add information, or even in this case, take information away. But you can add the full description of the map and the data itself, again, so that way you don't have to memorize this particular data set. You can present this as the map with the data and as much information as possible for that data. And then finally, one of the really unique features about the export is that you can take data away from a given area. So if you are familiar with spatial maps, this is sometimes called island printing. This is not true island printing because we do not remove everything away from the area. All this is doing is just shading in the area that you're working in. So in this case, Philadelphia. And you can see how distinctly different those two maps are when you do that. So this is called cutout selected locations. It is a really unique way to isolate the area that you're working in to print. When you export, as you can see here, it does not save this map. So again, if you need to save this map to come back to it later on, use the save function in that process. So the printouts are static, meaning that you don't have any way to interact with it. They are great for you to copy and paste into Word documents or PowerPoint or even email it to another user. But if you wanted to share an interactive map with somebody, you're going to use the share function to the right of that. So there are a handful of really unique ways to share a map. The link feature is just that. This will give you a link right here. And this link, you can paste it into an email, into a website, embed it into something you're going to send to somebody. But that link, when somebody clicks onto it, will open up exactly to the map that you're looking at here with the data you have on the map with any kind of customization that's available that you already did. You can email that link to another user. You can post that link or that map into any social media platforms. As data people ourselves, we love this feature because we love to talk about data. So this gives us a neat platform to do that. Oh, there we go. So here's my printout. And then the embed feature allows you to basically put the full interactive map that you see here onto your website for users to themselves interact, pan, click, move around the map at the same time. So the embed is a really neat feature. If you read any of our blogs that we have in PolicyMap, you'll see that all of the maps that are interactive there are basically embedded maps that we create from here. And then finally, here is our exported map. As you can see, we zoom in a little bit. The title, description, you'll see Philadelphia is cut out by itself. So only the points and layers are colored in for Philadelphia. It really makes it stand out. But if we wanted to, we can also crop all this information out in a much easier way. Okay, so that is the basics of our session today. Hopefully that gives you some ideas of how to use the tool. Again, when you do add data, make sure you look at the legend, make sure that you've customized it, be it points or layers. And then when you're ready to share or use this map that you create somewhere else, use the share features to the right here, or export it as a print that you can use somewhere else within the tool.